What's up, everybody? This is Jake here, Jake from State Farm, and well, I finally did it. I finally ordered myself an AED. So I figured I'm gonna make a quick video or a little video with a little rundown on this model. I'm going to talk about what an AED is. Going to brush on that a little bit. I'm going to walk you through how to turn it on, things of that sort. And then I'm also going to brush on a few other things as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this video. All right, so all of you know by now, unless you've been living under a rock, that I do first aid stations in my community with Wayne County Parks and the Old Village Plymouth. And this year, on June 16th, I will be doing a first aid station at Autos for Autism, which is a car show that benefits Berger, which is the autistic school that I actually used to go to as a student. It's held every year at the Garden City Middle School. And I was visiting an old teacher who happens to be on the board, and he asked me if that would be something I would be interested in, and I said, absolutely, I would be. So I got to go to a meeting and I got to meet the chairwoman, and she really liked the idea and invited me to come back every year starting this year. And I get to do that. Well, every event that I do, there is no AED on site. So when I first started getting into this whole first aid adventure, and that's what I'm going to call it, it's an adventure because that's what I seem to be on, new experiences each and every time. I knew that having an AED on site would be very important, and I'm going to explain to you why. When somebody goes into cardiac arrest, when somebody's heart stops and they stop breathing, they only have about 4 minutes to receive life-saving, high-quality CPR before any sort of permanent deficits set in, like brain damage and things of that sort. Now, there are multiple cases and have been multiple studies that have been done where if somebody receives immediate life-saving, high-quality CPR with a shock from an AED, their chances of surviving the cardiac arrest not only go up higher, but also the odds of them surviving without any sort of deficits also goes higher. Now, that goes without saying. People go into cardiac arrest for multiple reasons, okay? And unfortunately, not everybody will survive, even if they receive a shock from an AED, especially if they're elderly or they have existing conditions like heart problems or things of that sort. Their probability is still kind of low, but also still kind of high, if that makes sense. So if I'm working in an event and or volunteering at an event and somebody goes into cardiac arrest and I immediately start CPR and only perform CPR on them and don't use a defibrillator, they could still potentially survive the cardiac arrest. And there are documented cases where that does happen. Pediatrics and children, that's actually a little bit higher than adults because most children's cardiac arrests usually start from a breathing problem. It's usually caused by an issue with their lungs, so to speak. That usually is what causes cardiac arrest in children. It's usually not a heart-related issue unless they have like a heart condition or something of that sort. But most of the time, it's usually a respiratory problem that leads into cardiac arrest because when you stop breathing, your heart is eventually going to stop as well. So usually they stop breathing before their heart stops, if that makes sense, in some cases. Now, that goes without saying, I was borrowing an AED from a company called Heart AED located in Warren, Michigan, from a guy named Tom Perna, who works there. Basically, that organization, they give AEDs out to people who may need one, rather, for an event or whatever. So this one right here is actually a loaner that I've been borrowing for the last year and a half. But Tom needs this back because there's a couple other people that need defibrillators and they're running low on loaners. So I'm going to be giving this one back to him. And now I have this one that I can keep permanently and that I'm going to have on my person permanently. So I don't have to worry about giving it back or anything of that sort. This is the exact same unit as the one that I've been borrowing. But there are a few differences. This one came with a set of pediatric pads. This one only comes with the set of adult electro pads. Now, I'm going to just quickly, briefly talk about why there's two different types of pads, why there's pediatric pads and adult pads. Children require less electrical or less of an electrical shock than an adult does, or a full-size adult does. So children require less electricity than adults do. And an AED like this one is basically a computer for the heart. So if you've ever watched like an old medical show, like, Grey's Anatomy or something of that sort, or you've seen one of those documentaries from back in the day, you might think of a defibrillator as that, this big, huge machine with all these buttons, and then you have to like actually push to select the electricity that you want to deliver. Those are still used in hospitals. I don't think they use paddles anymore. That's what they called those things, the paddles, instead of the pads. The paddles were those like, little metal thing kind of things that, you put one on one side of the chest and the other on the, you get the whole thing. Those are called manual defibrillators. So manual defibrillators are basically the ones that you actually decide the amount of electricity that you give. This unit here gives 150 joules of electricity. So it's already preset. So the electrical, you don't have to select the amount of energy that you give or the amount of electricity that you give. It's already preset in this machine. So it will automatically deliver a 150 joule shock if it's needed. Another thing about another difference between a manual defibrillator and an AED is a manual defibrillator, you can shock. You're the one that decides when to shock. With an AED, the AED analyzes the person's heart rhythm to see if it's a shockable rhythm, because you cannot shock asystole, which is flatline. So if somebody's flatline or is in a non-shockable rhythm, the AED will not allow you to deliver a shock. So even if you have this hooked up to somebody and you push that button, which I'm going to open this up and explain all that in a second. In fact, I'll do that now. So let's open this up. So if you were to push, this is the shock button. There's three different buttons, three different features on this model. Just like the loaner one, which I did a video on a few months ago. So this is the green button. This is what turns the AED on. So you push that down and it turns it on. Now you'll notice that there is a green light flashing. Now the green light signals that the AED is fully charged. That it's working, that the battery is working. Unfortunately, you cannot recharge the batteries in a defibrillator. You're going to have to replace the battery. The battery in this unit is good until 2031. So in 2031, I'm going to have to replace the battery and put a brand new battery in there. You can't recharge the battery. Green light indicates that it's not only working, but it's also that the battery is also functioning properly too. Now, if the AED were to malfunction or the battery were to, let's say something were to happen to the battery or it got damaged in any way, this button in the center, this I button, which is actually a CPR assist, which I'll talk about in a second, will start flashing and it will actually chirp. So it's kind of like a smoke detector in a way, where when your smoke detectors start running out of battery, or the battery runs low, it starts to chirp, and it won't stop chirping until you change the battery. It's the exact same thing with this AED. So And I believe it'll also flash yellow or red instead of green if the battery needs to be changed. But like I said, the battery's good until 2031 unless it gets damaged in some way or form. Now, the pads do expire as well. These pads expire in 2027, 9/13, so September 13th, 2027, and then I'm going to have to replace these with another set of adult pads. So, like I said, the electricity is already pre-selected, 150 joules. Children require less electricity than adults do because they have smaller bodies. And also, most cardiac arrests that are, like pediatric cardiac arrests are usually caused by respiratory problems and not directly related to heart-related issues. It's usually they stop breathing for whatever reason, rather drowning or choking or, things of that sort. And then their heart obviously stops, because when you stop breathing, your heart's going to stop, okay? Eventually that's going to happen, unfortunately. So there are pediatric pads that you can use that are designed when you plug it in, that are designed to give a little bit less of an electrical shock than the adult pads do. Now, you can still use adult pads on children. You turn this on, this button here, it turns on the unit, which I'm going to do in just a second, just to show you. And then when it comes time for CPR, you can push this blue button right here. And basically what this does is it walks you through how to properly perform CPR. So it basically, some of them have built-in metronomes where it actually counts the compressions, like 1, 2, 3, like that. Some units, it actually has like a voice that actually counts the compressions for you, or a beep, like beep, beep, beep. Okay, so anybody can use an AED. I want to make that clear. You do not have to be certified or trained to use this. The lay public can use this. However, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do get certified, or at least take a course to learn how to use an AED, or at least have a better understanding of it. This particular unit that I bought came with a DVD. And basically this goes over CPR, how to use the AED, how to operate it, maintenance and things of that sort. Now, being that I am basic life support and I have a separate CPR AED certification as well, I'm already trained and already know how to use this. So, I don't have to worry about that. But if you don't have any training, I highly recommend that you do get trained. In fact, this unit also came with vouchers for like 10% off CPR AED training, save 10% on defibrillator training from Medic First Aid. I already have a place that I go to get my basic life support and first aid certifications. I am not going to any other organization. I really like Chase Comprehensive Health and Safety. That's where I go in Farmington Hills. They work really well with me. So that's the place I'm going to continue to go to. I'm not interested in going anyplace else. But if you were to purchase one of these, it will come with vouchers. So if you're not certified, you can go get certified, and it will be a little bit cheaper than, just signing up without it. So CPR Assist, like I said, basically walks you through chest compressions. It tells you when to give breaths and things of that sort. Now, I want to point out real quickly before I turn this on and before I explain a little bit more about the defibrillator itself, that CPR is, mainly focused on chest compressions these days. And the reason why they tend to focus on chest compressions instead of giving chest compressions and breaths, because universally it used to be 30 chest compressions to 2 breaths. That's what you would do. You would do 30 chest compressions, hard and fast in the center of the chest 30 times, 2 inches deep for an adult. And you would stop after the 30 and give 2 mouth-to-mouth rescue breaths. Nowadays, they're emphasizing chest compression only CPR or hands only CPR. And the reason why for that is a lot of people in the lay public are hesitant to perform CPR on somebody because of the fact of giving breaths. Well, I don't want to put my mouth on somebody, so I'm not going to even intervene. So the object of doing hands-only CPR, or why they teach that nowadays in most layperson CPR courses, is so people feel a little bit more comfortable doing CPR on somebody. They don't have to worry about giving mouth to mouth, if that makes sense. Now, the basic life support class that I took, we were trained to do, well, obviously the bag valve mask, which is that mask that you squeeze. It's a mask that's attached to like this rubber balloon thing that you squeeze and delivers breaths. But we also were trained on traditional mouth-to-mouth resuscitation as well. So if I ever needed to perform CPR on somebody at one of my events, or if I'm out on a camping trip or whatever I'm doing, I would still give breaths. That's what I'm trained to do, and that's what I feel the most comfortable doing. I do have a barrier device that I can use that basically you put your mouth on the device. You don't put your mouth on the actual persons, if that makes sense, but you're still breathing into them, but you're not making direct mouth-to-mouth contact. But if it was somebody close, like a close friend or obviously a family member or somebody that I really know well, I wouldn't even worry about using a barrier. I would just do it straight up if I needed to. Or just do chest compression only if it calls for that as well. But I'm trained to do both, if that makes sense. But CPR Assist does talk you through all of that. And like I said, some CPR assists, some units or AED units with their CPR assists have built-in metrodomes, or like a click, or like it sounds like a drum beat. Or all right, so this is the on and off button here. This is the CPR assist. And then this is the button that you push to deliver an electrical shock. So this unit also came with a owner's manual. And it also comes with, like I said, vouchers and then things of that sort. It came with a set of trauma shears, which I already have a set of trauma shears I keep in my on my trauma kit that I take with me to the gym and everywhere else I go. I take that everywhere. And then it also has a reference guide. So if you're untrained, you can pull this out and it basically tells you what to do. So to start, pull handle, remove protective cover. So you would open this up. You would pull this green thing, which I'm not going to do because it can actually dry the pads out. So I'm not even going to open this up. But what you would do is you would take your fingers or hands or whatever, you would pull this and it would open it up, and then basically the pads come out. Second step would be clean and dry skin. So you want to apply the pads to a bare chest, so you have to take the person's shirt off or cut their shirt off, which is why there's trauma shears. Step after that, peel and remove pads. So you would peel and then remove the pads. Place each pad, or peel each pad from the plastic liner, because there is a liner that it's attached to. And then it tells you where to place the pads. So for a female, and then a male, and then children, 0 to 8 years old, 55 pounds, or 25 G right here. So for children, you want to put one pad on the center of their chest and then 1 pad on their back. After that, like I said before, the AED is basically like a computer for your heart. So it already has a selected amount of electricity. This one, the pre-selected amount of electricity is 150 joules of electricity. It cannot go any higher than that. Like a manual defibrillator, like I said before, manual defibrillators, you actually have to push a button and select the amount of electricity you want to give. And it's also up to you to deliver the shock or not. Like I said, the AED will not allow you to deliver a shock to somebody if it detects that a shock is not needed. The only time that a shock will be successfully delivered to somebody is if a shock is indeed needed. Like I said, some rhythms that people go into do not see. You only have to do CPR will only work. You cannot shock somebody who's asystolic or is in asystole, is what they call it, which is basically flatline. Like beep. That long line that you see. If you've ever watched like Grey's Anatomy or whatever, which is kind of dramatic, but whatever. And then obviously this is the orange button to shock. And then this is the CPR assist. So to get help with CPR, you push that button and then it talks you through CPR. Now, even people who are highly trained like I am, or trained like I am, I still highly recommend that you keep a reference sheet. And I also recommend that you use the CPR assist as well. Even though you may know what you're doing, when you're in an emergency situation, especially if it's like a close friend or a family member or somebody of that sort, or somebody you really know, having to do CPR on somebody and use a defibrillator on somebody is a very highly emotional thing to do. And a lot of times when people find themselves in those situations where those interventions are needed, sometimes you may forget certain steps because of rather your adrenaline, or especially if it's like a friend or a family member, maybe you're really emotional. So it's always good to have a reference sheet just in case, because sometimes when shit hits the fan, everything that you start questioning, am I doing everything right? Am I pushing hard enough? Am I, going at the proper depth? Am I, going at the right speed that I need to compress that person's chest? It happens, okay? That doesn't take away from the fact that you're not trained or you are trained, or I'm not saying, oh, well, you obviously follow the instructions that I just went over. You have to, take the person's shirt off, so you can use these trauma shears and cut the person's shirt off, bare their chest, and then you apply the pads as directed. Now, you got to turn this unit on. You turn it on.
Begin by removing all clothing from the patient's chest. Cut clothing if needed.
So as you can tell, it basically walks through, it basically tells you what to do. So cut the person.
When patient's chest is bare, remove protective cover and take out white adhesive pads.
So as you can see, it's talking you through what to do.
When patient's chest is bare, remove protective cover and take out white adhesive pads.
So as you can see, it's talking you through what to do. So if you're a layperson and you don't have any training...
When patient's chest is bare, remove protective cover and take out white adhesive pads.
All right, I'm going to shut this off, though, so I don't drain the battery. But there you go. So it basically tells you what to do. Once you apply the pads, then it'll say, analyzing heart rhythm, do not touch patient. So you have to stand back from the person and not touch them. And then if a shock is needed, it'll say shock advised or shock needed or something along those lines. Most of them would say shock advised. Press the flashing orange button now. You would say, all right, everybody stand clear if there's other people around. Because believe it or not, you can actually get electrocuted yourself if you're touching the person. So it's very, very important that you don't touch the person when delivering the shock, or nobody is touching the person when delivering the shock. And then you push this, it delivers the shock. Once the person is shocked, then it'll say, it is safe to touch the patient, perform CPR, or resume CPR. And then if you need help with CPR, that's when you push this center button, this blue button for the CPR assist, and then it basically walks you through the entire CPR process. And not only does it walk you through the CPR process, but it also pauses and says, analyzing heart rhythm. So every 2 minutes, the AED will reanalyze the person's heart rhythm and decide if a shock is needed or not. So if a shock is needed, you deliver a shock, you perform up to 2 minutes of CPR, and then it'll reanalyze the rhythm. And then if a shock is needed again, it'll tell you to shock again, you can shock again, and then repeat. Or vice versa, if you hook this up and it says no shock advised and the person is not breathing or has no pulse, and you're trained to check for both, then you would just do 2 minutes of CPR, and then it'll reanalyze and say, rather, a shock is needed or a shock is not needed. So it's very self-explanatory. I know a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions because they assume when they hear the word defibrillator, they think, oh, you have to like push a button and you know, you're the one that gets to choose. Well, what if you shock somebody who doesn't need it? Couldn't that hurt them? Well, it can. And that's a good thing about an AED is even if you were to push this button when the pads are attached to somebody, it will not deliver the electrical current unless the AED itself detects that an electrical current is needed. So you never have to worry about shocking someone who doesn't need to be shocked. And that is the most important part, I think, about this particular unit in general. But AEDs in general, all AEDs are the same, basically. Just maybe different layouts. So again, really quickly brushing on the whole CPR thing, you want to do 30 compressions to 2 breaths if you're trained to give breaths. If not, then just continuous CPR until, EMS arrives and takes over. Chest compressions on an adult, you have to use 2 hands. It's 2 hands in the center of their chest. You place one palm in the center of their chest, and then you interlace your fingers. With your second hand, you have to lean over and use your upper body weight and compress the chest down at least 2 inches. Now, unfortunately, CPR does come with some complications. It can lacerate your liver. It can cause damage to your internal organs because when you compress somebody's chest, you're compressing all the organs that are, in that area as well. Obviously, if you're doing CPR on an adult, you have to push pretty hard, unfortunately, and that results in broken ribs, fractured ribs, dislocated ribs, bruised lungs, things of that sort. CPR is not glamorous, okay? It's not what Hollywood makes it out to be. It's a very highly physically taxing thing to have to do on somebody. Thankfully, I've never had to yet, and I hope I never do. But even people who are in incredible shape and go to the gym all the time like I do, by the end of the 2-minute CPR cycle, you're done. You're tired, okay? I don't care how fit or healthy you think you are. CPR will tire you out, especially if you have to do it longer than, 5 or 10 minutes. Let's say you live in an area where it takes the ambulance 15 minutes to get there and you're the only person there doing CPR. You're going to be beat tired by the end of, when it comes time for EMS to take over care, you're going to be exhausted. Which is another reason why I highly recommend people go get certified or at least go take a class, even if you're not getting a certification, just a class to learn how to properly give CPR, because it's very important to do it properly, number one. And number two, I also think it's really good to have that hands-on experience so you are aware of just how physically taxing it is, because a lot of people don't think it is, but it is, especially if you're the only one doing it. That's why in the BLS course, we focused on two-person CPR. So one person does mouth-to-mouth while the other person does chest compressions. And then at the end of 2 minutes, let's say you don't have a defibrillator, you're just doing CPR alone. The end of 2 minutes, then the person giving mouth-to-mouth does chest compressions, and the person doing chest compressions does the mouth-to-mouth. Again, if you're trained to do rescue breaths. Like I said, most layperson CPR courses nowadays emphasize the hands-only CPR. But like I said before, I'm trained to do both, and that's what I would do. I would do both. But if you're just a layperson with no training, hands-only CPR is ideal. Now, for children, on the other hand, it is highly recommended that you give breath still, because most cardiac arrests in children are caused by respiratory issues. So if it's a child, then it's highly recommended that you still give mouth-to-mouth. But if it's an adult, then you have the option of doing mouth-to-mouth and chest compressions, or just chest compressions. Now, let's say there was lots of fluid or whatever, and you felt uncomfortable doing breaths on a kid, then you could get away with hands-only CPR, because chest compressions, again, is what basically pumps the heart, and that's the most important part of CPR, is basically trying to restart somebody's heart. But it is highly recommended for children that you still give breaths, if, obviously, you're comfortable doing it. And even if you are uncomfortable, it's still highly recommended, but you could still get away with hands only. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a CPR dummy yet. That's my next thing I want to look into, so I can continue to practice and stuff. This actual AED that I have has an option where you can actually plug in pads that are practice pads. So basically, they're the exact same as the actual real pads, like these. The only difference is the practice pads, you can basically, it's basically where you can practice. You can like put them on a dummy or, a CPR dowel, and you can actually practice the full CPR with the AED. I am going to eventually get practice pads too, if I get a CPR dowel. The reason why I want both is because I recertify every 2 years. And a lot of paramedics and firefighters and EMTs that work in an actual ambulance and stuff, not that I'm ever going to do that, they train at least once a month, if not more, okay? So I would like to be able to practice my skills once a month or every couple of months, just to stay fresh and everything, or to keep my skills fresh. So that is going to eventually be something that I want to eventually invest in. That goes without saying. I wish I could do a video showing you the full cardiac thing of putting these on and performing CPR, but I have to wait until I get a CPR dummy before I can make a video like that. But eventually I would like to make a video where one of these days I actually want to create a YouTube channel where it's all first aid related stuff, where I give tutorials on, basic first aid related procedures, AEDs, things of that sort. And I do want to do a video, an instructional video on CPR as well. So I hope and pray that I never, ever have to use this, because the person is basically dead. If you have to use this on somebody, they're basically, they're technically dead. That's just putting it bluntly, okay? I hate to be morbid, but that's just the truth. So I hope and pray that this is never going to have to be used. I hope and pray that in 2027, when I have to replace the pads, I don't have to replace the pads because I had to use them, but I replaced the pads because I didn't have to use them and they expired. But I will tell you, living at home with parents who are aging, and I live in a neighborhood where I live where there's a lot of elderly people around me. In fact, actually, my next door neighbor actually has some problems with his heart as well. So it makes me feel really, really good to know that I have this permanently in my possession. So if, God forbid, my mom or my dad were to stop breathing, or my neighbor were to have a cardiac episode, or whatever the situation is, I have this here that I can use and hopefully save somebody's life with if needed. But I hope I never do. because again, shit hits the fan. But it's always good to know that you have it. It definitely gives me a bigger peace of mind, so to speak, and lessens my anxiety about everything, knowing that I have this, than not having it. Because again, just because somebody receives a shock from an AED with CPR does not mean that they're going to survive, especially if they have like an underlying condition. However, their chances of survival do go up a little higher if you use both CPR and an AED. And also, the sooner that you start CPR, the better. If you're going to sit there for 2 or 3 minutes and not do anything, yeah, the person might still revive, but they're most likely going to have some sort of deficit, unfortunately. But the sooner you put your hands on their chest and you start pumping, the better their outcome is of survival. So, again, it's just a tool. It's something that I hope I never have to use, but I'm glad that I have it, and I'm glad that, I have a place that I can go and get recertified every 2 years in my basic life support and first aid. Again, this is something that I plan on doing for pretty much the rest of my life, or at least into my 50s. And like I said, I'm only 31, so I plan on doing this for many, many more years to come. So this was definitely an investment, much worth it, so to speak. Because again, I may never have to use it. I might have just spent, all this money on an AED, and it's just going to sit and collect dust. But, well, not technically, or that's just, me speaking, so to speak, because of course, it's not going to collect dust, because I'm going to, like I said, this is coming with me on camping trips, road trips, car rides, and all my first aid stations. So it's not like it's just going to sit at home and collect dust. But what I meant by that statement is I may never even have to use anything, for the rest of my life, because I'm keeping this is mine to keep permanently. I may never in my lifetime ever have to use this on somebody. But like I said, it gives me a peace of mind to know that at least I have it. I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. If that makes sense. It's the same thing with like the pepper spray that I carry for self-defense. I don't ever think I'm going to ever have to use my pepper spray on somebody because I live in a very safe area. But I would rather have it on me and never have to use it than one day forget it and then find myself in a situation where it's needed. And it's the same way with my first aid kit. Like a lot of people are like, why do you take your trauma kit with you everywhere you go? Well, the day that I don't bring it with me is usually the time when I'm going to need it. So, again, I would rather have it and never have to use it than find myself in a situation where, oh shit, I wish I had where's my tourniquet? Or, something of that sort. Or, oh shit, somebody just went into cardiac arrest. I got to use the AED. There's no AED on site. So what am I going to do? Well, there you go. So I have it and hopefully we'll never have to use it. But if I do have to use it, then, hopefully it does save somebody's life. But anyways, I am Jake, and that is the video for today, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, just let me know. And like I said, eventually I do want to start a YouTube channel where I basically, it's all going to be first aid related stuff. Basic first aid related stuff, where I'll maybe show you some first aid techniques and things of that sort, and go over how to hold pressure on a wound. Or eventually, like I said, I would like to invest in a CPR dowel or dummy so I can practice and keep my skills fresh instead of every 2 years. And if that ever happens, then I'm going to eventually make a video demonstrating CPR. And like I said, this actually comes with a option where you can plug in practice pads to this unit. So you can actually use this in a practice scenario if you wanted to with the practice pads, not the actual pads, but practice pads, which are the pads that you are actually trained on when you take a CPR course. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm Jake from State Farm, and no, I'm not wearing khakis in this video. And I will be back with another video sometime soon.